I'm very glad that it is being remembered, as long as it's got some long-term effect, longer than just the 15th of April. Yeah.
So you want people to think about this tomorrow, the day after?
Yes.
So
I mean, Belsen, of course, was the only camp that was liberated by the British in the first camp, so it has got a lot of publicity. But of course there were loads of other camps as well, but Belsen was something very special. And you remember Richard Dimbleby making a report which was disbelieved by the BBC. They had to send somebody to check up on him whether it was really true what he... I mean, Belsen is... you can't really describe it. I mean, you see the pictures. We were just walking among rotting corpses for weeks. So to be alive at all is a bit of a miracle, to tell the tale.
Before you were taken to Belsen on a cattle truck, you'd been at Auschwitz for a year.
Yes, it's quite unusual actually. It's an unusually long time to be in Auschwitz for a year, because I was really, along all the horror story, I was very lucky.
Why do you say that?
Because very few people survive Auschwitz for a year. But I was lucky. I had two lucky things: that I play the cello and I speak French. These two ridiculously not really related things seem to have been very important in my survival. To come back to Auschwitz, I mean, I arrived in Auschwitz expecting to go in the gas chamber. Instead of that, I hear that there is actually a band there who desperately needs somebody to play the cello. So I was part of this Kapelle, as it was called, and it was a means of survival, because as long as they want music there, it would be rather counterproductive to put us in a gas chamber. So
who were you playing for then?
Well, we had a job. The job was to sit at the gate every morning, every evening, because you know that Auschwitz was surrounded by factories, like IG Farben, Buna, loads of factories. And the inmates of Auschwitz were the slave laborers in these factories. And since the Germans like things neat and tidy, we sat at the gate and played marches for these people to walk out. And in the evening we returned to the gate and played marches for the people to walk back in. But we were the only orchestra, the only female orchestra, and the only orchestra, you can call it an orchestra, who actually didn't go out to work, because we were a very ridiculous collection of young kids who might have learned the guitar or the flute sometime. I mean, we were not a professional orchestra, not like the men's orchestra in Auschwitz, they were proper musicians. We were just a bunch of kids.
How old were you then?
I was 17 then, but I was one of the few. We were about 5 people who could actually play their instruments properly. The others were just kids who might learn the guitar or something. And, it was a very big job to make this into a sort of possible orchestra, because we knew it was a way of possibly living the next day, as long as they want a band. We knew that the war was going badly. The way the interest in the music was subsiding, that's how we got our feeling of what's going on outside.
Yeah. And my understanding is that you lived in a hut, effectively opposite the gas chamber.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were blocks there.
Right.
Yeah, because somebody asked me, I won't mention any names, 20 years ago when we celebrated the 50th liberation, how did you know there were gas chambers in Auschwitz? First of all, you hear about the gas chambers, you don't like to believe it, but once you're in, you know they're there. And as it happens, our block was literally vis-a-vis. I mean, and don't forget, we saw the people walking in, sort of Lagerstraße in the road. We were quite near the street. People walking into the gas chamber and smoke coming out. I mean, yeah, it wasn't a mystery. You didn't try to hide it. That's how it was. So nobody thought they would come out of Auschwitz alive. I mean, whatever happens in the end, they'll put you in the gas chamber.
So when you were told you were going to Belsen, what did you understand that to mean?
Well, what happened is we were one of the very few blocks, because anybody could play anything, where Jewish people and Aryan people, as they were called, were together. And suddenly we were asked to come outside the block, Jews to one side, Aryans to the other. So we thought, that's it, gas chamber. No, they put us in a kettle truck. And you know, to actually physically leave Auschwitz was a fantastic feeling. Nobody thought we'd get out of Auschwitz other than a smoke. So to actually get away from Auschwitz, we thought, well, this is fantastic. Well, we didn't know what was ahead of us then. And nobody had ever heard of Bergen-Belsen. I mean, there were all sort of rumors going on. We're going to a camp called Bergen-Belsen. What's that? Oh, it's not such a bad, you know, what
Yes.
sort of rumors went along. Anyhow, so we arrived there eventually. And you know, when we arrived there, it didn't look the way you know now what's going on. The camp was very small when we got there. It was about 1,000 people, I was told, and we were 3,000 people arriving there. Anne Frank was in the transport. People asked me, did you meet her? I wouldn't know. You know, we were all looking like zombies anyway. So you can imagine, there was no room for us. It was an unbelievable situation. Winter. And we just stood there and looked around and, you know, thought, well, where are we here? And then we were, finally, they took us into tents. There were not enough barracks. There just wasn't room for us. You know, by that time, there was chaos all over the place. So they put us into tents. And of course, it was winter, it was freezing cold, and there was a big storm over the Lüneburg Heath. And the tents, if I talk about tents, I mean like circus tents, you know.
Yes.
Collapsed on top of us. There we were lying there, buried under the tents. Somehow we managed to crawl out. And then what always amazes me, we stood for the rest of the night in the pouring rain with hardly any clothes on. We didn't even catch a cold.
Why?
We were, I think, a different species of people by then. And then they stuck us into a shoe bunker, I remember. We were then put into a barrack where there were lots of shoes, and we were threatened if anybody touches a shoe, he'd be killed. But we were just lucky to have a roof over our heads. And the next thing, suddenly there were barracks for us. And you wonder what happened to the people who'd been in these barracks before we got, you know.
Yeah. Why? What was that place for? Did you understand?
Well,
what
I
were
think
you to
what
do there?
happened as the Russian front advanced, and the Germans were very keen to hide the traces of their misdeeds. So that where Auschwitz, for instance, before the Russians actually arrived, had blown up the gas chambers, trying to hide their traces, and started the death marches. And that happened because most of the really horrible camps were not on German soil, but in Poland and Russia. So bit by bit, the people were marched in a westerly direction. That is what happened. And so more and more people arrived in Belsen. It is really Belsen. There is no vocabulary to describe how these people looked who were marching for days and days, some on their knees, half dead, dragging themselves into Belsen. And, you know, then what happened eventually, that the weather got better. The bodies couldn't be buried anymore. I mean, what they tried to do with us, the people who could still walk about, is we were given some string to tie around the wrists and drag them into a big ditch, but this didn't last long. I mean, we were so weak by then. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean...
You were there to
for
die.
6 months I was there. I mean, it's a complete miracle that I got to the end of all this, yeah. So in the end, we just walked about among smelling bodies and didn't even notice it. This is the thing.
Right.
It was a landscape, you know. I mean, I saw British soldiers coming in who've already seen a war, don't forget, you know. They're not exactly, you know, sensitive people who fainted. I mean, yeah, Belsen, you can't describe it.
Before the British troops arrived, who were the people that were in charge of you?
In charge? Well,
Belsen?
I mean...
What sort of people were they?
That's a good question. Some of them I knew from Auschwitz, like Kramer, for instance. I knew him from Auschwitz. Suddenly he appears in Belsen. Again, you see, a movement from east to west. Quite a few of them I recognize from the old days. I mean, I don't know what the question was.
Who were they? What sort of people
were
they? They were they ordinary people, or?
You may well ask, what sort of people were these guards? You may well ask. You know, I do a lot of talking to German youth, etc. The trouble is, they didn't have the word murderer written on their foreheads. They were normal people. Had families. There are letters of people who did these dreadful things to their families. Nicest letters you can think of. Dear mommy, dear children, I hope you're behaving well. And at the same time, I wished I could give you an explanation, but I can't tell you what makes people do these unbelievable things and be convinced that it is the right thing to do.
What do you? I mean, you must have reflected upon that. What do you think can?
Well, I do think that we have to be very careful even now. You know, we are very ready to hate each other. I find it very depressing that we have to guard Jewish schools. I mean, what is this about? I'm Jewish. What am I? Am I dangerous? What is this about?
What do you think then? What is it about?
I think we've all gone mad, and I think it would be a very nice thing if we all sat together in all various colors and religions and whatever and have a cup of coffee together and talk about something nice. And we'll find that we have much more in common than separates us. It's this fear of the unknown somehow. Oh, he's Jewish, he must be a bit peculiar, you know. He's Indian, or he's... What is this? We're all human beings, supposed to be. Yeah, and in the name of religion, of course, the worst things happen. I wished I could give you a pill to remedy it, but I think the best way is to speak to each other. And to be curious, you know, you're different, tell me isn't that interesting? You know, something like that. It sounds terribly primitive and naive, but maybe that would help.
Was your own religion ever useful to you?
No, I do not come from a religious background. I didn't even know I was Jewish till somebody spat at me. But I'm Jewish, and it's okay with me. You know, I've been asked sometimes, especially in Germany, if it was so dangerous to be Jewish, why didn't you get yourself baptized? I said, then I would be a baptized Jew, you know. Yeah. I mean, why should I be something which I'm not? I happen not to be religious, I don't come from a religious background. But that's fine, you know.
It's fine, yeah.
We should accept what we see and what we are and get on with each other. But I mean, this is utopia I'm talking about. But you see, today we have a big celebration and this and the other, and I hope tomorrow we haven't forgotten what we are thinking about. That is what it's about.
Can I ask you about the day the British troops arrived? And you've already explained that some were so horrified that they fainted. It's
difficult to describe that day. I mean, we didn't actually think for one moment that it was going to happen. And then you see a British tank. I mean, it is really impossible to this. It took us a long time to think in what actually is happening. We're still alive? It's unbelievable. But you know, it didn't take all that long to realize that we're still having problems. Okay, then the British came in and saw this disaster. The war wasn't finished yet. And they left the camp because they had to try and get help. And they left us in charge of the Hungarians who manned the watchtowers. And there was still a lot of shooting going on after, because they were scared stiff of us.
Right.
And then the British came back with what they could get together, you know, doctors. I mean, it was an unbelievable situation. Okay, then now we are liberated. Now what? Now comes the realization. And you know, I've written a book about that, and you can see the letters I write to my sister who lived in England, how our mood from absolute, unbelievable happiness suddenly came to realization. We're still having a problem. Who are we actually? Well, I'm born in Germany, but I can't call myself German. I'm Jewish. but you're liberated now, you can go home. Where's my home? Do I go back to Breslau, which was, the Russians were there by then, there wasn't a single person of my family who was still there. Is that my home? No. So we became that famous new race, displaced persons. And the big problem, where can we be placed? And the rest is history.
Yes. You came to England 11 months after liberation.
I came to England, but a lot of people didn't have such luck,
yes,
and had to go to Palestine.
I've got some messages which I'd like to read to you, if I may, Mrs. Lasker Wallfisch, from people who are watching you all over the UK. Bear with me as I am...
Unbelievable technology here.
This viewer says, one simply cannot imagine what Anita Lasker Wallfisch had to go through. We must always remember the experiences, a truly inspiring story. And Linda Hughes gets in touch to say, my father was one of the liberating soldiers at Belsen, and every day till the day he died, he could not get over what he saw or experienced, which you've already alluded to, haven't you?
Very nice.
Do you, I mean, you said we're liberated, there's a feeling of euphoria, and then now what? But can you, do you recall what it was like to feel free?
Felt good. It's difficult to describe. I mean, suddenly we knew that we would still be alive by the evening. You know, it's a normal people can't really, you know, you can't be expected to really feel what that felt like. It was fantastic. But it didn't take too long to realize that we're having a problem here.
Mm. Why is it important to you, if it is important to you, I don't want to put words into your mouth, to talk about it still?
Yeah, you say you don't want to put words in my mouth. People ask me, why do you do this? I have never volunteered. They said, could I please talk about... We've never been asked any questions. Okay. Now suddenly people ask questions, and I think it is a sort of moral duty to actually do what we are doing, because there are millions of people whose voice have been extinguished. You go to Belsen, in Auschwitz you don't see any graves. You see these mass graves, 5,000 unknown people, 10,000 unknown people. We are them. We are their voices, because nobody knows who they are. So I think it's just a moral duty. If you're asked to speak about it, speak about it. I've never volunteered, can I please tell you what it was like, you know. I mean, it would be wrong to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. Simple as that.